Everything in the model currently seems to be well even out. There's only one problem, and for example, if you pay attention to here and here, you can see that those distances are uneven, and that's something I have to even out. There are two ways how you could work with geometry as a helper to do this. Let me show you the first approach. So I decide that, for example, those 2 points I can use as a reference. I press Shift D, so I duplicate these points. Here, let me move them down. And then, for example, I press F, so I have now a line. And you see this line basically represents the length. Now I could use this, for example, to move it to another reference, or not reference, but a set of points to evaluate. So there I see, well, this is slightly off. Okay. And then maybe I go to the next point. And those, for example, I move out. And for example, and I go to the next one. And the nice thing is, because I only have 2 lines, 2 points, so 1 line, I can also use this line to maybe line it up with the rest of the geometry of my model to maybe correct some distortions or the way how the geometry or the topology flows. So you see, I did not only change the way how these points are positioned away from this edge, but also now these points are a little bit more kind of like in a nice line. And let's go to here, rotate. So I see I do the same. And then I only have 2 left. Maybe like this. Okay. So now it looks like that this edge and this edge on the curved path, they're more even or parallel to each other. You can actually also measure lines, by the way. So for example, I have this edge selected. If you go to the property panel and you go to mesh display, you could show edge length. So for example, this would be a metric 1.321 centimeters, or imperial, you see how many thousandths of an inch this would be. And when you click multiple edges, it only shows you the length of each edge. But what's actually nice about this edge information is, if I now modify, for example, 1 point, it shows me how all edges that are affected by this point are changed. And you can also, for example, show an angle. We also have, for example, the area of a face, and there now you see the angles. So you can use those, for example, for more inside mesh dimensioning. So this was basically approach number 1. Let me show you approach number 2. Because you see that this one was a little bit, while to a certain degree being flexible, it was also more labor intensive, and there's a different approach we could use. So I'm going to try to select only points that, for example, express kind of like a cross-section view like this. So these points I select, press Shift D to duplicate, press Escape, press P to separate, and then leave edit mode. Select my profile object, go into edit mode, And then I actually press SX and 0, so I scale this curve into a line. Because all I need is just from this view the nice curve, and from here that could just be linear. And actually, let's move this one to my 3D cursor so it lines up with my object center. Then I can, for example, E and X extrude it out, kind of like this. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is how we can create an offset to the surface. To create an offset, you can go to the modifiers, add modifier, and then solidify. Solidify basically gives thickness to a shell, and it creates the shell basically by offsetting the surface. So now you can see that that surface has a thickness, but all we need is actually just the other shell being offset. So here we have an option to turn off fill rim, and then you can see you end up with two surfaces. So you see that follows it. There are a few options, for example, even thickness, high quality normals, and there seems to be a bug, so we turn this one off. And there's something else going wrong, and that is actually down here. You see that in this corner something funny is happening, and what's going on there is simply the mesh is a little bit how could I say that, not in order. So let's go to mesh display, and here's something called normals. And go to a side view, and you see those normals are those blue lines. They basically tell you the direction where, for example, this face or this face or this face are looking to. And this face looks to somewhere else. So the modifier is a little bit confused because all those faces look to the left and this face looks to the right, and physically that's not possible. But we can easily fix this. We can just AA, select everything, and then we can go to the toolbar, and at normals we can say recalculate. And then this basically puts them all into one line. We can also maybe flip to the direction of the normal. You see that changes the direction of the offset. And that was basically it. So it's not really a complicated task. Yeah, with the solidify, you have, for example, a slider, which you can use for the thickness. You also have something called an offset. So offset basically, kind of like you can see, I can shift where, for example, my target surface will be and the end surface. And I can make an offset to that. So you see that it generates a thickness from my original surface away. But of course, in my case, I want it rather to be this way. And you see now, when I turn even thickness on, the mesh doesn't go crazy anymore because we fixed that geometry part. Okay, so let's see how we can employ this. So maybe I try to move this one to a position where I feel this is what I need. So now I can go into edit mode for my cloth iron, and then actually use this offset surface as my reference. So you see that actually this probably is a more convenient way to do this, because I do not have to adjust the mesh all the time. But if, for example, you only have two lines to match, maybe the first approach is actually faster than this approach with the solidify modifier, because you have to do some other tests. But then if you have multiple points to correct, you can see I can just focus just on fine-tuning my mesh, and I don't really have to adjust the reference geometry all the time. And when this is done, I can delete it, and there is now the iron model with the finished back part. And I just provided you those different ways how to do it. So basically you can decide for your own workflow when you would like to select which one.